I'm gonna tell you guys something about myself that shouldn't come as a surprise. I love a good anthology show. They're so cool. For those unaware of the meaning, Google defines it as
An anthology series is a written series, radio, television, film, or video game series that presents a different story in a different set of characters.
basically, they're like a little short story book. It's not one big serialized narrative that spans the entire course of a show, a style that has overtaken all others in recent years. They're like little bite-sized stories. It's like a little snack instead of a huge multi-season course meal. And some of my favorite shows of all time are anthologies. I grew up with Clone Wars, which started off as a show
For 12-year-olds.
but quickly evolved into an action-packed epic that introduced fan-favorite characters and recontextualized an entire trilogy of movies, all while being damn good to boot. I dare say it is now required viewing for anyone who wants to call themselves a true Star Wars fan. Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, the first of its kind, is filled with deep, thought-provoking stories that still hold up to this day, and it remains as influential as ever. Or who could forget about that season of True Detective, which featured two insanely good performances of such rich and layered characters in a weaving murder mystery? Yep, they only made one season, never made any more. Just one season and that's it. While I love a good serial drama, there's just something about an anthology series that hits different. You can cherry pick episodes or arcs to show your friends and family. You can watch as many or as little as you want and you'll never be missing out. And this style of storytelling is perfect for the genre of sci-fi. There's so many cool concepts that wouldn't make sense for a whole movie or show, but are perfect for the average runtime of a television episode. And no series is a better example of this than Love, Death, and Robots. Executive produced by Tim Miller and David Fincher, it's a collection of mostly sci-fi shorts that range from horror to action to comedy. And as a self-proclaimed lover of sci-fi, this show is right up my alley. But I'm gonna be honest, it kind of flew under my radar for a while. I had had it recommended to me for years by a few people, but I kinda just never got around to it. But recently, while I was hanging out with some friends, one of them decided to throw on an episode, and I was amazed, astonished, blown away even. This is what I'd been missing out on? I could not believe it. So naturally, I went home that night and I binge watched as much of it as I could. And man, what a show. So many different animation styles with each one bringing visual brilliance. It's got sharp writing, excelling in both its dramatic and funny moments. And each episode presents such a unique and memorable concept. It's not an exaggeration to say that this show truly has everything. So, as I wait not so patiently for season 4 and the new series, I figured I'd go through and talk about my 10 personal favorites and break down just why I love this show so much. I am going to be spoiling these 10 shorts, so be warned. This is the best of the best, the cream of the crop, if you will. So go experience the show for yourself first if you haven't already. And if you have seen it, share your list in the comments. I want to hear what other people liked. You can even tell mine sucks, give it some booze, or throw some tomatoes at it. Before I give my 10 favorites, I want to make it clear that I don't really think any of these episodes are bad. And believe me when I say that it was very difficult to pick my favorite out of these. But at the end of the day, I just had to go with the ones that made me go, holy crap, that was so raw. And I was saying that quite a lot watching these 10. So, in addition to ranking these, we're going to give it a rawness rating. This very reliable and totally not arbitrary metric won't necessarily indicate what order I'll put these in. Some of these shorts do work better on other levels besides just how cool it is. But that being said, it definitely helps. So, without further ado, let's start with number 10, Volume 1, Episode 5, When the Yogurt Took Over. Look, hear me out, okay? I'm just a huge fan of this one. It's short, sweet, and absolutely hilarious. Like, I showed this one to my dad, and he thought it was funny. It passes the dad test, a shining indicator of quality in my book. Like the title says, this short follows a science experiment that makes a cup of yogurt sentient, which leads to an intellectually superior yogurt-based being that takes over the world and fixes all of humanity's problems. But it comes with a price. Anyone who watched my Severance video knows that I love when things get wacky, and the concept is just so random. It makes for a nice palate cleanser after all of the dark, heavy shorts that make up most of the show. It's just a silly little sci-fi what if, and I think that's so fun. And the best part is, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It only works because it's so short. It's witty, well written, and I'd probably say it's the funniest short out of all of these for me. On the rawness rating scale though, I'm only going to give it a 3.5, because it's not really trying to be. It's more like charming, a little whimsical, but I love it all the same. And anyone who says they don't want to live in Yogurt, Ohio is lying. For number 9, I'm going to go with Volume 1, Episode 6, The Secret War. I've always had a soft spot for sci-fi stories with historical context. It makes them feel a lot more real that way to me. Taking place during the siege of Stalingrad, it follows a small group of soldiers pursuing an evil horde of aliens across the forests of Siberia, led by a gruff but effective lieutenant. And this is just one of those stories that works because of its simplicity. It's just a group of guys fighting some aliens, but the setting and the pure carnage makes for a damn good time. Like I'll say with most of these, the animation is top notch, especially during that chill-inducing scene at the end with the lieutenant's death and the bombing. A callback to the music played earlier on, mixed with the catharsis of every alien being blown to pieces, is just chef's kiss. The short has a good bit of lore to it too, and I think it's cool how the writers managed to flesh out this world in such a short runtime. I also like the little character interactions. I'm always a fan of the character dynamic of soldiers on a death mission in some desolate place, and this one is no different. I'm a big fan of the scene where they're hanging out in that crashed plane. It's a really creative set piece, and it does a good job of hammering home the harsh conditions these characters are in. The action's great, the setting's great, and it's delightfully gory, which leaves me no choice but to give it a rawness rating of 8.5.
Ah, sweet! Man-made horrors beyond my comprehension.
For number 8 on this list, I'm going to give it to Beyond the Aquila Rift, or Aquila, or Aquila, or whatever. It's episode 6, and also from volume 1, and oh boy, get ready to question your whole existence with this one. This episode starts off with a pretty straightforward narrative of a spaceship that accidentally charts itself way off course to the wrong station. But it doesn't take long for it to become clear that things are very, very wrong. Tom, the main character, soon finds out that he's further away than he expected, and then comes to find out that the space station he ended up at and his sexy new girlfriend are all just a fake reality being fed to his emaciated self by an alien on an abandoned space station. Nice! But jokes aside, this short packs a couple of twists on top of one another, which is one of the things that I love about this show. It's so good at establishing a concept and then playing with your idea of what that concept should be. And I think that this is one of the most profound and existentially terrifying ones across this entire series. I love how they kind of toe the line between the alien being a benevolent being that just wants to help anyone who ends up there, and it being an evil parasite that may or may not be luring ships there. And the idea that even if you discover the truth about where you are, the alien can just reset your memory and you'll never be the wiser. Absolutely mortifying. I mean, just think. This could be happening to you right now. You never know. But anyway, this short's great, but I'm only going to give it a rawness rating of 5, with the bulk of its points coming from that ending scene. It's honestly more interested in causing an existential crisis in anyone who watches it than showing you something cool, and I think that's just fine. The number 7 spot is going to go to another one from Volume 1, Suits, Episode 9. I feel like I really don't see this one being talked about a lot, but it's so fun. Something about the fusion of old-fashioned, hard-working, toothpick-chomping farmers with huge mechs that fight aliens scratches an itch that I honestly never knew I had. The more cartoonish style of animation fits the vibe of the story nicely, and it's a nice break from the hyper-realistic style that's present throughout a lot of these shorts. I love the dynamics between the characters, and they have some simple yet well-developed traits that make it so entertaining to watch them fend off a horde of aliens. Their cheesy one-liners are self-aware, but they made me crack a smile every time. This show is pretty grim for the most part, which is perfectly fine, but it's nice to have one that doesn't take itself too seriously and isn't afraid to get a little goofy. And that's not to say that it doesn't have its emotional moments either. I don't know about anyone else, but I found myself getting a little sad when Jake died. Like, the show is just so good at making you care about its characters in so little time. And that's why the short works so well in particular for me. It's got fun characters and a whole lot of alien-killing robot action, which I can get down with any day of the week. Putting it into the rawness rating, I'm only going to give it a 7, which may seem low, I know. The action is cool and all, but I think the short is trying to be more fun and lighthearted, so some of the rawness falls by the wayside for me. I love it all the same, but it doesn't quite reach the heights of some of the ones further up on this list. For number 6, I'm putting episode 10 of Once Again, Volume 1, Good Hunting. Now, I'll be honest, I kinda had trouble figuring out where to put this one. I knew I wanted it on the list, but my feelings are actually kind of mixed on this one. So why so high up, you ask? Because in my opinion, its highs are just too good to put it any lower. This short follows the life of the son of a shapeshifter hunter who forms a bond with a shapeshifter. It spans many years and the narrative evolves fast, which is kind of one of my main complaints. This short has so many layers to it, so many themes. It deals with parents and how we're different from them. It's a period piece. It deals with some more mystical elements. It has themes of colonization, industrialization, classism, racism, all the isms. And while it does portray all these themes in an interesting way, that's also kind of my issue. I think this short kind of buckles under its own weight. It's only 16 minutes long, and it's trying to say so many things at once that the narrative feels jarring and moves at a breakneck pace. There's a lot to unpack, and it's honestly kind of overwhelming. I almost feel like it would be better off by focusing on maybe one or two of its many themes and really fleshing it out, because what we're left with is kind of an amalgamation of ideas rather than a strong focus on the thematic narrative. However, this is a very emotionally rich story, and I found myself very invested in the characters, and that saves it quite a lot in my eyes. With this fast-moving plot, you watch the protagonist change rapidly before your eyes, and it's very moving at times. The story can get very dark, but I like how it opted for a more hopeful ending that fits well in my opinion. I'm also a really big fan of the animation. Its 2D medium is stylistically simplistic, but it's so gorgeous and it fits the story so well. That montage near the end in particular is just so beautiful to watch. The detail is absolutely mind-blowing. Now, for the rawness rating, it's great on an emotional level, but not super high in action, which is why I'm going to give it a 5.5, mainly for the beginning and the end. But now, it's time to get really raw. And starting off the top 5 is Volume 3, Episode 9, Jibaro. When I think of the best example of this show's animating prowess, is this one. It's so stylistically unique. The level of detail on every element of this short is kind of unfathomable. Something as simple as bark on a tree or as complex as the layers of jewelry on the siren is detailed with extreme precision. The movements are fluid and evocative, and the action is so visceral on every level. The way the camera moves in an unpredictable manner is something that I'd normally criticize in live action, but it works perfectly in this medium and it helps to convey the frantic nature of the story. I mean, just look at this scene, man. It's no wonder this is one of the episodes to win this show an Emmy for animation. Another thing I love about this one is its audio. It's very key to me for a story where sound plays a role in the plot to have good sound design. And the way it jarringly cuts from dead silence to the clamoring of the knights to the screech of the siren is just so cool. The score is implemented super well too. There's a beautiful piece at the end especially that expertly highlights the emotions of the story. I kind of found myself feeling bad for the siren as she wails in deep pain after having all of her jewelry stripped off of her, and when she tries to do her dance and she just can't do it. Damn, bro. On the surface, this story seems relatively simple, but after reading some comments from its creator, Alberto Mielgo, I've learned that it's got some deep themes that are open to interpretation. It tackles colonialism, toxic relationships, greed, lust, in all these very subtle ways. All in all, it's just a very compelling story of these two people who at first glance seem to be soulmates but are completely incompatible in a very deadly way. It's beautifully animated, scored, and written, and it's a great way to close out the third and most recent volume of this show. As far as the rawness rating goes, this one is an easy 9 for me. The action, the huge bloodbath, and the siren's captivating dance of death, so cool. This short deserves every bit of praise it gets. For my number 4 spot, I'm gonna go with episode 4 of volume 1, Sonny's Edge. This was the first one that was shown to me, and it honestly couldn't have been a better way to get introduced to the series. It takes place in the cyberpunk-esque world, where alien beasts are linked to humans and they fight for sport. This short focuses on one particular fighter, Sonny, who has a very personal connection to the alien she uses to fight with. Guys, I'm not gonna lie, this might be the rawest thing I think I've ever seen. The highlight of this short is obviously the fight in the middle, and it is just insane. You can feel the impact of every hit, with both monsters having unique abilities that are utilized in the coolest way. The gore is intense and the fight is absolutely thrilling. Like, I was genuinely speechless the first time I watched it, and it doesn't even need to be said how perfectly animated it is. I love the way the lighting is implemented too. A lot of people tend to overlook how important lighting is, especially in animation, but this short is a perfect example of how, when it's done properly, it can elevate the visuals to an entirely new level. And when you have a runtime as small as this, it makes it easier to labor over every detail. And the way this short was able to build its world, flesh out a character substantially, establish motivations, and show me the coolest thing I've ever seen in so little time is impressive to say the least. I also love Sonny as a character. Her sort of tough and edgy attitude would normally be pretty corny to me, but it's done so well here. And the twist at the end is my absolute favorite across the entire series, and the final frame closes out this gory, action-packed short in the best way possible. I mean, yeah, I really don't have much else to say. The story's simple, but the execution could not have been more perfect, and I'd be a fool to give it any less than a rawness rating of 10. Entering into the top 3 is Volume 1, Episode 18, Zima Blue. It follows an artist in the distant future named Zima, who now only deals in a particular shade of blue, known as Zima Blue. A reporter is called by Zima to tell his story, and she soon discovers that there's more to him than the public knows of. This one is a lot different from the other shorts. It's light on the action, and it opts for a more 2D style animation, but behind the simplicity of its style is a story that is so moving on a philosophical level. It gives you so much to think about. It's got themes of what it means to be an artist, the search for purpose, the meaning of life. Zima started off as a simple robot designed only to clean a pool, but through continuous modifications became more and more aware until now, at this point, he is indistinguishable from a regular human. It asks the question of at what point Zima became a human, or at what point he became less of a robot and more of a human. But in the end, it doesn't matter, because Zima chooses to shed his complex human existence and return to a more simpler one, and I don't think the ending could have been any more beautiful. I think people tend to search for purpose in huge achievements or how successful their life has been, but I think this short is suggesting that maybe true purpose can be found in the satisfaction of completing a little task and doing it right, and that's a pretty deep message for a 9-minute runtime. This short is thought-provoking, stylistic, beautifully animated, and a great way to close out Volume 1. Because it's light on the action, I'm only going to give it a rawness rating of 6.5, but don't let that fool you. This is one of my absolute favorites. Coming in at number 2 is Volume 2, Episode 3, Pop Squad. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I think this might be the darkest short out of all of them. It takes place in the distant future where a vaccine known as Reju allows humans to live forever, but with a price. Having kids is now completely outlawed due to concerns of overpopulation, and the way this is enforced is through a special police force whose only job is to kill quote-unquote unregistered offspring. So yeah, only happy thoughts in this series. The short follows one particular cop who struggles with the toll of committing this awful act. Now, for most of these shorts, I feel like they worked pretty well for the runtime they were given. They're all killer, no filler, and I didn't really feel like any story needed more or less, except for this one. This world the short creates is so unique, so dark and grim, that I found myself morbidly curious to spend more time in it. This is one of the few shorts that I would have loved to see as a feature-length movie or maybe even its own series. The dark and dingy atmosphere is so evocative. Concept is emotional and thought-provoking, and the ending is as beautiful as it is depressing. I also love the finer details of this short. It's equal parts cool and disturbing that children's toys basically become collector's items because there's no kids around. I like how the cop cars are deliberately over-the-top cartoonish and round to contrast the very realistic, dirty city streets. Detective Briggs is extremely well developed and features probably my favorite voice acting performance in the whole show from Nolan North. This short is a perfect example of how to effectively tell a story in no time at all. It's amazing that they were able to make it so compelling and create such a layered and awful setting. It's a certified classic, the best of Volume 2, and I never want to watch it again. And I mean that in the best way. For this one, I'm only going to give it a 4 on the rawness rating because it's not really action-packed or cool. It's like, sad. But nevertheless, it still remains as one of the best ones from this show. Now, all of these shorts were great, and to be honest, they're interchangeable on my list for the most part. They all bring something unique to the table, and I appreciated them equally, just in different ways. But immediately after I finished the show, before I even sat down to type this script, I knew what my favorite was going to be. I knew which stood tall above all of the rest. The number 1 spot on this list could go to no other short than Episode 2 of Volume 3, Bad Traveling. This is, without a doubt, the short I have rewatched the most out of any of them by far. In fact, I think I'm gonna go watch it again.
20 minutes later.
Yep, still amazing. I don't really like to throw around the word vibe that much because I think its usage can be pretty arbitrary, but I absolutely adore the vibe of this short. Something about a crew of sailors stuck on a dirty, dimly lit, rain-soaked ship on choppy waters hundreds of years ago just activates something in my brain that I can't explain. I think it's partially because it reminds me of the hours I'd spend on Sea of Thieves with my friend, as I fumbled my way through our digs while he did most of the work. I also think the way this short explores the dynamic of the crew is so fun. Torrin's slow and methodical takeover of the ship is so fun to watch, and I love the dichotomy of his character. He kills and murders his crew without hesitation, but he does this to do what he sees as the right thing. And I've said this about every short so far, but I really mean it this time. The animation is insanely good. The character models are so unique and creative, and the action is silky smooth. The Thanopod has the coolest design ever, and its death at the end is a gorgeous, fiery sequence that is my favorite scene in this series. The story may not be as deep as some of the others, but its simplicity works. For anyone still confused when I say the word raw, refer to this short, because this is the absolute definition. It's got gory kills, giant sea monsters, and some really creative character dynamics that fire on every cylinder. These elements come together to create an absolute masterpiece of storytelling, and you know what? It's barely even a sci-fi story. That's how you know I love this one. I don't put it this high up lightly. In my opinion, its placement is undebatable, and this show will have to try very hard to top it in any possible later seasons. And its rawness rating? 11 out of 10. Yeah, that's right. We're using improper fractions now. The unequivocal best episode of the series, without a doubt. So yeah, that's my list. If you watched all the way to the end, thank you. I hope my list wasn't too offensive, but like I said in the beginning, if you disagree, let me know what you think. The great thing about this show is that it's got something for everyone. What each individual person gets out of it is unique to them specifically, and I think that's really cool. And if you like me doing rankings, let me know too. I got another huge one in the pipeline, plus another couple reviews of more recent movies that I hope to get out in the interim. On an unrelated note, I seem to keep having these weird dreams that I'm on an abandoned space station, and this weird spider keeps talking to me and telling me that I'm billions of miles from Earth. If anybody knows what this might mean, let me know. But for now, that's gonna do it. See you in the next one.